They're getting some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
Search for Nancy Guthrie.
The cameras in the backyard were never touched, not smashed, not pulled from their mounts, not disabled, fully functional, motion activated, recovered intact by the FBI after Nancy Guthrie disappeared from her Tucson home on the night of February 1st, 2026. When investigators finally reviewed what those cameras recorded on the night she was taken, a source with direct knowledge of this federal investigation described the finding in a single word: odd. That word is the reason we are here today. Let's first establish the verified baseline. The front doorbell camera at Nancy Guthrie's home on East Placa in the Sabino Canyon area of Tucson was confirmed disconnected at approximately 1:47 in the morning by the Puma County Sheriff's Department. That timestamp is undisputed. The footage the FBI recovered from that camera, including frames captured before it went dark showing a gloved hand reaching toward the lens, was pulled directly through coordination with Google's back-end server infrastructure. That process has been verified across multiple mainstream news outlets. That is the part of this story almost everyone knows. What hardly anyone is discussing is what lay behind the house. According to sources briefed on this investigation and cited by ABC News, Nancy Guthrie's property had additional cameras beyond the front door. Motion-activated units were positioned to cover the backyard, the side yard, and the pool area. These are not continuous recording cameras. They don't produce a video timeline you can scrub through. They are sensor-triggered devices that activate when motion enters their detection zone, producing time-stamped still images, not what sources described as thumbnail captures. Each thumbnail corresponds to a precise moment when something moved within the camera's field. The FBI recovered these cameras and extracted the imagery from them. In the days leading up to February 1st, that imagery was active. Multiple individuals were captured in the backyard and side yard on separate occasions before Nancy was taken. The FBI has those images. This detail has remained largely unexamined in the public record, but it shouldn't be, because here's what makes the camera evidence in this case genuinely shocking. Those very cameras, generating thumbnail after thumbnail of movement in the days prior, recorded nothing suspicious on the night of the abduction. Functional cameras. Active system. People were documented using those exact spaces days earlier. And on the night it happened, silence. When a source inside a federal kidnapping investigation describes that silence as odd, they are not speaking casually. In the language of experienced federal investigators, odd means the pattern broke. It means that when they checked those camera logs expecting to find activity, they found nothing. And the absence of what they expected is itself a crucial finding. Consider the investigative logic. Cameras were actively logging motion events in the days before. A crime occurred at that exact property. You check the records expecting to see approach, positioning, movement through the yard, anything, and instead, nothing rises to the level of suspicious. That gap between expectation and record is not background noise. It is a question with enormous implications. Enormous implications exist for how this crime was planned and who planned it. Now, let's examine the explanations. There are three realistic ones, and they do not carry equal weight. The first is that whoever carried out this abduction simply didn't know those backyard cameras existed. In the focus of the operation, they zeroed in on the front doorbell and missed the units behind the house. Possible in theory, but those cameras had already captured several individuals in that backyard in the days prior. If you, or anyone working with you, had been in that yard multiple times, you had already walked past those sensors. You had already been recorded by them. The notion that you then forgot they existed doesn't hold. The second explanation is that the abduction happened entirely at the front of the property, entering and exiting through the front yard within the doorbell camera zone, and the backyard cameras simply had nothing to capture because nobody went near them. This is the most straightforward interpretation, and it's possible. But if that were true, the source who described the footage as odd would have no reason to make that claim. Investigators don't use that language about evidence that fits neatly. They use it for evidence that doesn't. The third explanation is the one I believe investigators are most focused on. Those cameras weren't smashed because they didn't need to be. Someone with detailed knowledge of the property, its camera positions, motion detection zones, and coverage angles either moved through that space with precise awareness of the blind spots or ensured in advance that those cameras would not interfere regardless of where they went. That second possibility opens a technical door that has not been discussed nearly enough. The cameras at Nancy Guthrie's home, including the front doorbell, appear to be Nest cameras operating within Google's ecosystem. The FBI recovered footage from the front doorbell by going directly to Google's servers. Nest cameras don't only store footage on the device. Data is transmitted and held on Google's cloud infrastructure. That's why physically disabling the camera didn't erase everything. Now, here is the question that truly matters. Were the backyard cameras part of that same Google Home account? If they were, then every camera on that property would be managed through a single cloud-connected account. Google Home accounts can be accessed remotely. Camera settings, motion detection sensitivity, recording modes, everything can be adjusted through the app from any device with an internet connection. If someone had access to the login credentials for that account, they would not need to physically touch the backyard cameras at all. They could adjust or suppress the camera's functions without leaving a broken mount or a smashed lens behind. Intact hardware, no footage, no physical evidence of interference. To be precise, no source has confirmed remote account access as a finding in this investigation, but the technical pathway exists and it aligns with every element of the evidence picture. Intact cameras, pre-abduction footage of multiple individuals familiarizing themselves with the property, silence on the night itself, and a source who described that silence as not coincidental, but odd. The question of how someone obtained those credentials is not trivial. Technically, it wouldn't be complicated. The credentials could have been written somewhere in the home, saved in a browser, shared with someone who had legitimate access to the household, or observed by someone who spent time in that home and knew exactly where to look. Any of these possibilities points in the same direction, towards someone who was not a stranger to this property or household. When you step back and examine the complete camera picture, what you see is not the signature of a random crime. A stranger acting on opportunity does not spend several days in the backyard of their target in the days leading up. A stranger does not approach a front doorbell with a gloved hand in a manner that shows precise knowledge of its location. A stranger does not navigate the security infrastructure of a residential property with enough sophistication that the cameras left intact produce no usable footage on the night of the abduction. The camera evidence, read in its entirety, is consistent with advanced planning, property-level knowledge, and a deliberate approach to the surveillance setup that goes far beyond merely smashing a lens. The FBI has the pre-abduction thumbnails. They have the gap. They have the back-end data from Google. Google knows exactly what those cameras should have captured, and they also know what they didn't. The source who called it odd is inside that investigation, and that single word tells you everything about where this thread currently stands. It hasn't been resolved. It hasn't been explained. And until it is, those cameras, untouched and silent on the night Nancy Guthrie disappeared, will remain one of the most critical unresolved questions in this case. Nancy Guthrie has been missing since February 1st, 2026. She is 73 years old. She is the mother of Savannah Guthrie. A federal kidnapping investigation remains active. If you have information, don't hesitate. Contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or tips.fbi.gov. The time to act is now.